Welcome back to another episode of Feathers and Field Goals. I'm Bryce Leslie, your host, and this is an action-packed episode today. A little bit doom after the defeat that Delaware had, but we'll jump into that. We'll be joined later by Delaware beat for the News Journal and Delaware Online reporter Kevin Tresolini to get his thoughts on the Fighting Blue Hens season. Brody, of course, will provide another version of the Pecking Order and rival rundown, something that I personally have been looking forward to seeing revealed, but still love what Brody provides the show on that end. I'll be providing a quick basketball update as we're now in week 3 of the season for both men's and the women, some positive things to add for both the programs. And then we'll revert back to football, shifting focus onto Wake Forest, where Conor O'Neill of Deacons Illustrated sits down with us to talk everything Wake Forest. It was a good conversation, had a lot to say. Ryan Carty said in his midweek presser, the hardest defense he's ever had to prepare against. So thank you, the listener, for joining us for another week. If you are new to what we do for Feathers and Field Goals, thanks for joining us today. We hope you find something in here that brings you back. And let's do what we always do. Let's jump into our recap and analysis of what I would say was Delaware's most frustrating loss of the season, a game where we've seen both sides of the coin at this point. We've seen comebacks and glory, the shootout win against UConn, the homecoming 9-point and 2-minute run to beat Louisiana Tech. We've seen the Western Kentucky and now Sam Houston games where it came down to a final kick to extend the game. And in the case of Sam Houston, it shouldn't have come down to the final kick to continue the game. Delaware falls 26-23 to Sam Houston, who gets their first conference win of the fall. I'll just start off before we jump into how we're going to do the recap today. Is I don't want to take any credit away from Sam Houston. Phil Longo, staff, the players outplayed Delaware, outcoached Delaware. They deserve the win. But it still was frustrating for Delaware. Co-host Dan Steenkammer and producer Brody Hamilton bringing you both in. I want to try something new this session. We have an action-packed show. So I'm going to try to structure us to, I'm going to bring up 3 phases of the game, and I'm going to set a shot clock for us to get our thoughts out. I've done a lot of talking at this point, so I want to leave it up to you two for the 3 phases, and I'll lay out all 3 when we get there. And then at the end, I'll maybe go back through and fill the cracks if any were missed, because we're going to hold ourselves to a shot clock today. One will take the offensive side of each phase, and the other will take the defensive side. And we'll split up some special teams moments at the end in this 3rd phase. I'm going to challenge you both. Don't jump or allude to what happens next. I think this game story is divided nicely in 3 phases. We're going to hold to 90 seconds per side, and this isn't going to be shown on the podcast and on our show on YouTube if you're on there. But I'm pulling up a shot clock for us now here on this in the recording studio to keep us moving along here. So let's start with the first phase of the game. And I believe Brody is going to be taking offensive duties, and Dan is going to be the defensive coordinator for us in this segment. So the first phase, when the game had promise, it starts from opening kickoff to in the middle of the second quarter, specifically 6:19 remaining on the game clock to be exact. Offensively, it took a while to get warmed up. There's 3 punts to start, but they later cashed in on 10 points in their next 2 drives. Defensively, what a start. 5 straight punts and not a drive going longer than 6 plays or 30 yards. So I feel like maybe to start this one, let's go with the defense. So Dan, once you get going, I'll start us on the clock here.
Well, Bryce, they usually say, or I have it in my mind's eye, that a 3 straight 3-and-outs or at least 3 straight stops of some kind are a kill. You get a kill in a game as a defense when you put together that kind of string of stops. And so for Delaware to open the game that way, defensively, it really had you thinking, man, once Delaware's lawnmower of an offense gets going, and I'll leave the offense to Brody, but once Delaware's offense gets rolling downhill in a good way, it doesn't look like Sam Houston has the pieces together on offense tonight to keep up with Delaware. And that was that early indication. You looked at Landon Luck passing for Sam Houston, and the completion percentage just wasn't there early on. You figure Delaware can kind of pin its ears back and rush the passer a bit more too if Delaware's playing with the lead and can force Sam Houston to play passing game from behind. But in the end, that's not how this one panned out. You're looking at a Delaware defense in this first phase really did give Delaware's offense every opportunity to go up by 3 scores. So that's what really stood out to me is Delaware's defense was really pretty suffocating early on, and Delaware did not take advantage of that during the middle stages of the game that I know we'll get to in just a little bit.
With time to spare, leaving it over to the offense now. Brody, as we said, slower start for the offense. Had a really phenomenal drive to get its first touchdown of the day. And unfortunately, had to end with 3. What are your thoughts on the offense in this first drive, or first phase?
Where you look at the success that this offense has had in the past, specifically either on the road or against more talented opponents, you think about the UConn game at home and the FIU game on the road. This is early in the season. You think about their balanced attack. It's very he was very balanced. I think UConn, it was like 25 and 25 or close to that in terms of rush to pass. This touchdown drive, the only touchdown drive of the first 3 quarters, you had a run, an incomplete pass, a run, a pass, a run, a pass, a run, a run, and then the touchdown run from Nick Minicucci. And that's really where this offense is best, where they can be diverse, and that's what we saw in this opening half, up to the 10-point margin. That's really what was working for them, and they kept the chains moving.
The second phase of the game, and at the end of the first phase, I think we can all agree across the board that the vibes were pretty high. And it looked like if it was trending this way, the defense kept making stops. The offense at least kept its momentum up. I wish it didn't end that 3 with a personal foul moving them back. But the second phase, it starts at this point, following the 5th defensive stop, Delaware getting the ball on their own 20-yard line, and ends with a Sam Houston field goal at the 11:58 mark in the fourth quarter to cap off their 26-0 scoring run, pushing the game to 26-10, 16-point margin at that point. The second phase, neither side wants to help out each other. We'll start with the offense first on this one. Offensively, with 4 turnovers, 2 fumbles, an interception, and a turnover on downs in the stretch, and 2 3-and-out punts sprinkled in. Probably the worst, I would say, 7 drive sequence for the offense across the entire 2025 season. Brody, I'll let you take it away from there.
The first turnover, it comes after a big play, but it's one of those plays where Carty just gets in his bag and he does some weird wildcat shit, and then Byron Ellison kind of turns his back to the tackler and loses the ball, and that's kind of where I go, it's going to be one of these games again, isn't it? It's going to be one of these games where we make just enough mistakes to lose the game, and that was the first domino to come down. He gives Sam Houston the ball in Delaware territory. They walk it in pretty easily for a touchdown, just a minute and a half. Then we get the ball back. And suddenly that balanced attack is gone. You have an incompletion. Nick Minicucci takes a sack, and then you have another incompletion, and then a punt for a total drive of negative 7 yards in 52 seconds, and that's where the momentum starts to turn for the offense.
Yeah, and I think sacks are probably a part of the tail in all 3 phases of the game, even though the first and the third had some good moments, was a big issue in progressing drives downfield. Defensively, with Sam Houston, 6 of their next 7 drives ending in defensive points, 2 touchdowns and 4 field goals. Dan, what about the defense here?
Delaware's defense in the middle part of this game, I look at a particular drive that could go under the radar with our memory kind of concentrated on the second half and what wound up being low valleys and high peaks of the second half. Late first half, to end the second quarter, it had a field goal drive by Sam Houston that wound up allowing it to be tied at 10 going into halftime. And I'm looking particularly on this drive that concluded with the Bearcat field goal. At one point, Delaware had Sam Houston taking timeout, facing a 3rd and 17 at Sam Houston's own 31-yard line. That was after a Keyshawn Hunter sack of Landon Locke. So you're thinking, okay, Delaware has a chance to go into halftime with a lead, and it can, maybe even Delaware can get a quick one and kind of make this a bigger margin, the way it looked like it might be trending earlier in the game. Instead, following 3rd and 17, you had a 20-yard pass and an 18-yard pass for Locke. So yeah, 20 and an 18. It all runs up to, yes, one of those cases where Delaware's defense stood up to hold Sam Houston to a field goal, but those field goals adding up eventually, it adds up to a lot of points when Delaware's defense is having a lot asked of it to make stops and keep this one close within reach. Now, ultimately, that's what Delaware's defense did. So I do feel that in this part of the game, this phase of the game, this middle window of the game that you've identified, Bryce, I did feel that Delaware's defense actually did just enough to keep Delaware hanging around and within 2 scores.
I'm impressed with both of you keeping it to 90 seconds. I wouldn't have stopped you if you kept going. Maybe I should have said that heading into this third segment, because, I mean, this had covered so much time in the game, and it felt like every time something that could have went wrong for Delaware. And that's why I titled this neither side wants to help each other out, because that's kind of what it felt like in this moment. The third phase, though, where the comeback felt short. This starts when Delaware scores a touchdown in 3 minutes to cut it to within 10, and ends with the heartbreak of a three-play sequence. I don't even want to blame it on the missed kick, that it looked like Sam Houston got a hand on it. I think you saw from the celebration of the player that looked like got a hand on it. I think it shows that Sam Houston deflected it at the line of scrimmage, but I'll let Brody get into the offensive sequence there at the end, but first I'll let Dan go with the defense, because it's only one drive here. Bend don't break. Sam Houston held to a field goal attempt, which they missed, and I'll add special teams onside kick into this discussion. Their third successful onside kick recovery in as many attempts. Their second in 2 weeks, and so I'll add that into the defensive discussion on this segment here, Dan.
The onside kick recovery by Delaware on the road, another one this season, similar look to it, to the onside kick conversion, for that term I'll use. It was that first occasion where the stadium lit up on the Delaware half that I was situated in. I think Coach Carty even touched on it at one point here on Wednesday, just the being in a building in Houston where it wasn't an on-campus site and it didn't have that same juice in the stadium. Delaware at times failed to bring its own juice as a team, or really bring that edge or that precision to its game. So that was some occasion where, when you do have the onside kick recovery by the Blue Hens, it totally lit up things in terms of the energy and it was, you could really feel it. So from that point, you think, wow, Delaware may ultimately have enough on offense. I'll let Brody get to that, but the very end of the ball game, Delaware's defense, what I'll highlight especially is Delaware's defense was rewarded for making a stand where it settled Sam Houston for a field goal. Sam Houston had that missed field goal in the fourth quarter that kept it within arm's reach for Delaware, and that missed field goal by the Bearcats is where I first felt the door could be ajar. So definitely proud of Delaware from a blue and gold POV of pushing Sam Houston in the very end, making the Cats sweat it as far as that missed field goal that Delaware forced an attempt on. That's really what kept the door ajar.
And what kept it open for the offense that came to life, 2 touchdowns and a promising start to the potential game tying or game winning drive. Brody, let's talk about the end for the offense.
Yeah, unfortunately, Nate Reed's perfect onside kick is not a game plan. It helps to play the first 58 minutes of the game as well. And that's a shame, because after that onside kick, I really thought that we were going to win the game. I was like, all we need is a field goal to tie it, or like a touchdown to win it. But then just I would say borderline comedy of errors. Not to put the loss on any one player, because there is so much that could have been done throughout this game to win it. And those things just weren't done. You think about the drop to set up first and goal by Scott. You think about the pass protection that was just not holding up to the Sam Houston defensive line all game. And you think about the missed kick by Nate Reed, who up to that point had did pretty much everything you had that you could ask of him. It just comes down to a game that was lost by just a little bit, but shouldn't have been lost at all. Actually, should have won by multiple possessions, if you ask me. If the coaching and preparation kind of did what they were supposed to do, which is just unfortunate. Because this Sam Houston team, I mean, props to them. These last 2 weeks they've been just on rocket fuel. I think being like outgained in terms of yardage, as well as net success rate by the opposing team against Oregon State, and now at home against Delaware. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, well, just a quick edit. I agree with you on it wasn't anyone's fault because they should have handled a lot of business a lot earlier. Yeah, not blaming anyone there, just a sequence. And I think that maybe I just want to touch on a couple points before we move on to inside the huddle. But the first one being is their red zone offense, in the sense of at the end they get down close and they find ways to set themselves up for hard positions moving forward. At the end, they took a sack on second down that led to a third and long. They didn't have to score on that play. They still had room between the first down and the goal line. But you take a sack, it sets yourselves up for hard field position moving forward, and then eventually having to settle for 3, it being a missed 3. But in that second quarter, taking a penalty that sets you back and only having to take 3 as well from that. The sack charts were the concerning. I want to credit Sam Houston. They had a game plan we weren't ready for and honestly didn't adjust to. They had 3 sacks on the first 2 drives. They had a sack on second down of our last drive of the first half that took away a 2-minute drill and then led to that drive that Dan talked about that led to 3 points to tie it up. They had a strip sack turnover after a 35-yard pass play downfield in the third quarter. And they had 2 sacks on our first touchdown, even in the fourth quarter, even though it ended at 7. And they had a sack at the end of the game that led to them winning the game. I don't really have an all-22 film to really pin. Was it the sacks? Was it the line of scrimmage? Was the Sam Houston back end doing a lot to cover up reads? But probably the first game of the year where I thought pass protection was an issue for the Blue Hens. And I feel like just to wrap you guys up on the points, turnovers. You can't do it, especially in that stretch. In FBS football, Conference USA football, you can't make a lot of mistakes and then expect to control the rest of the game. And I think that's why they've had to play behind against Sam Houston, against Western, against the Jack State and Liberty on the road. It was basically an empty stadium. Dan was there, so it wasn't empty. But it's tough to really, build yourself up on the road when you make turnovers like that. And we've seen a similar stadium environment with FIU, and it's because they were clean on offense and they created turnovers on defense. So they're setting themselves up for rough positions. And I think penalties 8 for 81, similar to Sam Houston, but I don't like the trend we're seeing on the penalty side in the past few weeks as well. I'll end with a positive, though, to kick us off out of here. Onside kick University, that's insane. I wish that was in better position than Louisiana Tech was in terms of win that game. So it is a shame that we couldn't take that magic out. I can't say they can rely on that moving forward. I don't want to be in that position again these next 2 weeks. But last one, Sean Wilson, best game in the blue and gold. Outside of the fumble, I thought when they had to abandon the run, Byron Ellis and Greg Spiller did well running the ball until they had to leave it falling down 16. That recaps us here. The Sam Houston game, I think we can maybe just overall agree, let's throw this out the window. Let's not think about it heading into these final 2 weeks of the year. The Louisiana Tech win still sets themselves up for success, getting to that 6-win benchmark that will be annual, at least from our perspective, even this year, if they don't get a bowl handed to them from getting to that benchmark this season. So with that, let's do a recap of this last game, a little bit stretch further inside the huddle, inside the press box this week with Delaware Online, the News Journal beat reporter, Kevin Tresolini. joined here for another version of Inside the Huddle, or I guess this time I should say Inside the Press Box this week with Delaware beat at Delaware Online and the News Journal, Kevin Tresolini. Kevin, we talked about doing this, and it felt like it was the correct time to call you up and join the show after the Fightin Blue Hens are getting towards the tail end of their first season in FBS. Kevin, thanks so much for taking some time with me as we start heading into this final stretch of football coverage in 2025.
Thanks, Bryce. Glad to be with you. Appreciate the enthusiasm you've always had for covering the Blue Hens, and great work by you guys on this podcast.
Thank you. And I feel like in the placement of this segment comes after us at Feathers and Field Goals broke down the Sam Houston game, so I don't want to stay too much on the topic because we had a lot of not so great things to say after that result. So
it was a not so great performance by the Blue Hens. Yeah, probably their worst of the year.
Yeah, let's start with it and then look into the general scope. After another frustrating November loss for Delaware, falling to Sam Houston 26-23 on the road, after an exciting comeback win the week prior, I think the group experienced both sides of a great end of game comeback. And what feels like multiple times this season, we've seen the UConn comeback, we've seen the Western loss that felt similar in the Sam Houston, maybe not in the game, but in terms of the ending of it coming down to a final kick to extend the game. In your eyes, what went wrong? I might have a lot, but what went wrong last Saturday for the side that now falls back to 500 at 5-5?
Yeah, I mean, it never should have come. It never should have come to that. Now, I was not at the game. I was not there personally. I was just kind of watching it on TV. On ESPN Plus, but they started great, and you're thinking, wow, they're just going to cruise here, and just what a complete turnaround with Sam Houston scoring 26 straight points and taking charge, and then there's 11 minutes left, and it looks like it's over, and then they just march down the field for a couple touchdowns and recover another onside kick, and Nate Reed's got another shot at it. I mean, pretty amazing. They ended up having that shot after how bad they looked there, for a long time in the second and third quarters. But I mean, obviously the 3 turnovers Delaware had were really impactful, as turnovers always are. And they didn't take the ball away. But I thought one thing that I just kind of observed during the game was it seemed like Sam Houston kept getting a lot of like third and long completions and stuff like that, and that was really critical to their ability to come back and take charge of the game. I mean, they just got that quarterback just he started awful, 2 for 14 or whatever he was, and then he just kind of started making some passes when they needed them. I mean, it wasn't like a passing football clinic or anything like that. But hey, 3rd and 16, let's get a first down, and they kept getting them. And again, I don't know if that was because Delaware's coverage was poor, if they just weren't putting enough pressure on. Probably a combination of both. But yeah, so those were the 2 things that really kind of jumped out at me: the turnover margin, and just the long passes in key situations that the Bearcats were able to convert.
Yeah, not pretty for, I guess, all 3 phases of the ball. Besides the onside kick, that was for the 3rd time straight this year.
Just amazing.
Have you ever seen something like that? That's 3 for 3 on the year.
No. And the neat thing is, like, every single one has looked the same. Like, the ball bounces, and then it takes that huge hop over the guy on the other team to land in the arms of a Delaware guy just sprinting right there.
I always said it's like skipping rocks on
the physics behind it. The physics behind it must be worth a master's thesis or something like that, because of that second hop it always seems to have.
It's like that second
maybe it's
bounce.
The 3rd hop. Maybe it's the 3rd or 4th hop. I don't know. But it's a big hop.
Yeah, I was going to say, maybe that second hop's like when you're skipping on like skipping a rock on a flat lake, like that first one just picks up the second one. But it felt like in that one, they had a better shot to, I wouldn't even say tie, to win the game more so than the Louisiana Tech game.
Well, the drop ball. Yeah, the drop ball by the freshman tight end.
And then the sack right before that to set up a longer play. Right. Yeah. But enough with the Sam Houston game, ready to turn the page. Going back, I'm jumping from last week just to back in time into August and preseason. What were your expectations for FBS for the Hens? What do you think they would have little issues with in the transition in terms of on the positive end? But where were more of your question marks? What did you think that they would struggle with?
Yeah, they've actually done better than I thought they would. I mean, I think I thought they might win 4 games. They got a chance to they got a real good chance to win 6. They have a chance to win 7. That's going to be really tough with Wake Forest this weekend. But they got a chance to win 6 games and have a good record in the league. And I don't think I would have thought that, But the interesting thing is, I mean, the margin for error is so slim in these FBS level games, and a couple mistakes or the failure to make a couple stops or the failure to move the ball in key situations, everything is so pivotal. Everything is so pivotal, and the games that they've won, they've kind of done the right things in that regard. And the games they lost, they haven't. I mean, the Sam Houston game, was just awful in terms of, not being able to kind of make the plays that you need to make and not being able to avoid the mistakes that you can't make. That I was down at the game at Liberty, and that also kind of came down to, ill-timed mistakes. Coach Carty's call on the fake punt ended up really kind of hurting them. And in that one, they just couldn't stop the running game for Liberty. So every game there are these things that stand out. But no, I think Delaware's done better than expected. I think they should be proud of how well they've done. Obviously, they have another conference game left against UTEP, which they can win. And they do that. It would be a pretty darn successful first season, I think, in Conference USA if they could do that. And finish 500 overall and 500 in the league. That'd be pretty impressive. I mean, Ryan's only had one FBS level recruiting class. I mean, I know, Delaware always got guys who were borderline FCS, FBS recruits anyway. A lot of their recruits have gotten FBS level offers, from the MAC or from Conference USA schools or whomever. But they've really only had one recruiting class since they announced that they were going to move up. So, obviously the transfer portal makes it a little bit easier, than it used to, and they've certainly had some additions from the transfer portal. I'm writing a story right now about Kyrie Duplessis, the wide receiver return man, who's one of those transfer portal gems that they unearthed. And
how about him? How did he not get on the field at Coastal? That's kind of the question that I have.
Well, he was saying today, and I mean, I haven't really looked at the way Coastal did things, but he was a lot more involved 2 years ago than he was last year, but he said they had a great running game and they ran the ball a lot. So, that was kind of what he said today.
What are some of your other surprises? I mean, Kyrie Duplessis, and talking to him today, that I knew that was probably one of them, but maybe any other, I guess both sides of the ball, offense or defense.
The offensive line, though I don't think it had a great night down there at Sam Houston, has done a nice job. I mean, there's some experienced guys up there. Anwar O'Neill, got ACC offers coming out of Middletown High School. Fightin Blue Hens has had a great career at Delaware. They got some good guys up front. Those two in particular. And I think, whenever you hear about teams moving up to from FCS to FBS, how are they going to handle the physicality? How are they going to handle the increased size and stuff like that? And that was what I always kind of assumed. In talking to Coach Carty and Coach Rojas about it, they often kind of said that the speed factor was more of a difference. That was going to be a little bit tougher to kind of meet and match. Just the speed that some of these teams have, and I remember thinking that when they played Jacksonville State, and Jacksonville State had those 2 hard hits early in the game that caused fumbles that ended up allowing them to really kind of take charge of that game. So I think the fact that the offensive line has often been pretty good, has been a key thing. Nick Minicucci, who wasn't going to be the starting quarterback, looked like Zach Marker had kind of edged him out for the starting job. Who knows what might have happened after that if Zach had stayed in and maybe not done great, who knows. But Nick's done a great job. He needs to cut down on the turnovers. He's had a couple. Obviously quarterbacks are going to throw interceptions, especially when you throw as much as Delaware. But, he's got to kind of cut back on the turnovers a little bit. Defensively, I think I'm like a lot of people. Sometimes I wonder if Delaware needs to have, a few more guys in the box to get more stops in the running game and to get more pressure on the quarterback. I'm gonna leave that up to the real football gurus to to decide. But that's just kind of my observation in that regard.
As you alluded to earlier, the Hens, I mean, they have it all in their control ending the season at home with a chance to get to that 6 wins, which on an annual basis is going to be that new benchmark when you move from
Right.
FCS thinking about a home playoff game and that being the goal every year. But now it's getting to the 6 wins and hopefully start competing higher up the standings in Conference USA. But before that, against a 7-3 Wake side, a really tough defense. He talked about it with Coach Carty today, probably the hardest defense they've had to prepare against, or himself preparing against as an offensive coach in his history. And then hosting UTEP to finish the year, as I said. Where do you think the Hens need to improve on in preparation and in execution to finish the year to get to at least 6 wins before maybe we can start outlooking at how possible it is they can be placed into a bowl? We started a bowl tracker on our website and starting to root against other teams to see if there's not going to be enough bowl eligible teams. But the team doesn't need to worry about that yet. They need to worry about Wake and UTEP.
Yeah, it's like you said, Bryce. This is a really tough game. Wake Forest, of course. I mean, those of us around here who'd watched Wake in recent years, we're very familiar with their coaching staff. From their days in the CAA, but Wake was always kind of looked upon as, that ACC program that because it's such a strong academic school, they don't have the great football tradition, that kind of thing. Was a school that maybe Delaware could compete with a little bit better, but they've been really good in their first year under Coach Dickert. They've been really good. So this is going to be a tough assignment for them. I mean, they just beat Virginia when Virginia was a top 25 team, and then they knocked off Bill Belichick and the Tar Heels. So, they're not going to want to stumble when they got Duke looming next week. And, and obviously, they want to get in the best bowl that they can. But what is Delaware going to have to do better? They're going to have to be really, really clever on offense and execute. And I think mix it up. They haven't mixed it up as much as a lot of people would like. I think sometimes, they've kind of had to throw the ball more than they perhaps wanted to, like the Liberty game and the Jacksonville State game, when they kind of fell behind. But, I'd like to see the running attack be a little bit more involved in the offense, and they got to stop making turnovers and they got to start forcing turnovers. They just got to do that better.
The Demon Deacons, it's probably the first time, but not the last that I'll say this, had not given up a defensive touchdown in 2 straight games. So that it'll be interesting. It'll be an interesting task for Coach Carty and the offense. A fun one here to end you with, the UConn overtime shootout win and the Louisiana Tech comeback win on homecoming. 2 special games to cover in person. I mean, where do those sit on your rankings of games covered in Delaware Stadium?
Yeah, I've seen so many Delaware football games. I mean, I was trying to kind of go back in the archives a little bit. There was that game at Towson. Was it 20? What year was it? It was when Dave Brock was coach. Towson was ranked real high. Delaware went down there. They were losing whatever it was, 31-20 with a couple minutes left, and they came back and won on a 2-point conversion. Towson went to the national championship game that year. Trevor Sasek was playing quarterback for Delaware. That was one that really stands out. Back in the early KC Keeler years when they had the great teams, they had a triple overtime game against Massachusetts here at Delaware Stadium that Delaware pulled out. I don't have the score in front of me. It was a high-scoring game, of course, because it was I think it was 3 overtimes. Those were 2 I kind of thought of. But man, I'm at that stage in my life, where my memory isn't as good as it used to. Isn't as good as it used to be. You've
been covering for a long time now, so to your credit on that.
I've covered them for the News Journal since 1999, and of course, I covered them as a student. I covered the 1979 national championship as a student, and the 2003 national championship as the News Journal's beat reporter. So yeah.
Well, Kevin, I wanted to thank you for helping me throughout these past few years. I started in Delaware coverage just tweeting offers for high school recruiting. I had no experience. Or really a thought to where I would be doing this today. I was doing it when I was a student and had no vision for where we go. So I appreciate your guidance and advice you've given me both in person and online these past few years. Please, if not already, check out his phenomenal work. Get your Delaware Online subscriptions and looking forward to seeing your work in these coming days, weeks, and months and years ahead of time. For the
I hope I got a bunch of years left, Bryce. Hey, thanks to you, man. You're doing great stuff. I love your knowledge. I love your enthusiasm. Keep it up. You guys are doing a great job.
Awesome. Thank you, Kevin. And the Feathers and Field Goals programming, jumping into the pecking order and rival rundown after this.
Okay, welcome back to the pecking order. This is my weekly power ranking of Conference USA. If you've seen it before, you know how it's done. I'm just going to throw it up on the screen. Shit, that's the wrong one. Hold on. Okay, that's the right one. So at number 12, we still have Middle Tennessee. And I mean, they're just going to be down here for a while. Above them, we have New Mexico State, who's in a similar place right now. UTEP just above them. And at number 9, you'll notice we have Sam Houston. So like when I look at the power rankings, I have to look at the whole season, but I also have to look at momentum. Uncle Mo, as Dan's called it, and where it's going, and it's clearly positive for Sam Houston coming off of 2 pretty massive wins. So I had to bump them up. I'm not sure if I can bump them up above Liberty, but they're knocking on the door. It's kind of like 3 tiers here, and this is the bottom tier, and they're at the very top of the bottom tier, which, I mean, good for them. So moving on, we have number 8, Liberty. I still have no idea how they did that to our defense, but besides that game, they just have not looked very good. Losing 21-17 at home against Missouri State, and then going on the road to lose at FIU in overtime. I just don't know what this Liberty team is. I don't even think like Liberty fans know. Right above them, we have FIU. They've been hanging around number 8 for like the past 4 or 5 weeks. This is just where they've been, and they're gonna stay here. I don't know what else there is to say about that. They did beat a Liberty team that smashed us. They have a great win against Western Kentucky. I just don't know how much higher they can go, unfortunately. Number 6, Louisiana Tech. And number 5, Delaware here. I kind of have them next to each other because these teams are actually very similar when you think about it. Because at home, they're pretty good teams. They can handle just about anybody at home. And then once they go on the road, they just don't know how to win a game. And this is true with both. And that's why they're right next to each other. Of course, Delaware has the head-to-head, but they won by such a small margin that if the home and home was flipped, which I guess we won't ever see because they're moving to the Sun Belt, I'm sure it would have gone the opposite way because, like I said, neither of these teams know how to win on the road. Number 4, we have Missouri State. I'm actually not sure why I have them this high. Of course, they're 6-3 or 7-3, whatever it is. Maybe they're 7-3, but they've only beaten UTEP, FIU, Middle Tennessee, New Mexico State, UT Martin, and a Marshall team who at the start of this year looked completely dead. Their best win is against Liberty, which I guess we didn't do, so that's why they're above us. Western Kentucky is still hanging out in the cuck chair, essentially, in Conference USA, right behind Kennesaw and Jacksonville State. They're in kind of this weird third-place situation where I think everyone kind of agrees that Jacksonville State and Kennesaw State are the best 2 teams. Of course, we just had a hell of a game between those 2 last Saturday where my number 1 team from last week won, but it's another one of those cases where I think home field advantage definitely played a part. Jacksonville State, as great as they are at home, haven't looked quite as good on the road, but I still think are better than Kennesaw, and they better hope that the Conference USA Championship game is in Jacksonville, because if it's at Kennesaw, it might go differently. And if you're Kennesaw, it's hard to beat a good team twice in one season. I think that's a Bill Belichick quote, possibly about playing a good the AFC teams in the playoffs. But either way, that's my pecking order, and it's again really tough at the end of the year to be doing this because everyone's kind of beat each other. There's no one really who looks amazing in Conference USA anymore, which is unfortunate because I think we had a lot of strong contenders that just cannibalized each other. But that just shows you how deep Conference USA is. Deeper than the SEC, definitely deeper than any other conference in the country. Anyone can beat anyone on any day, and that's just a show of how deep the conference is. Moving on to rival rundown, it's kind of a weird episode because a lot of our rivals are talking about the conference or the college football playoff situation. Of course, I watched every minute of Navy beating USF. I don't know why I was cheering for Navy again, which I have tended to do, but I was, and they beat USF, and that was kind of cathartic to see because USF burners on Twitter, if you're familiar, are not famous for being the nicest people in the world, so it felt kind of nice to see them reminded that they are a G5 team, even if their cross-state rivals have been poached by the P5. That doesn't make USF a Power 5 team, and they were reminded of that by a service academy that by every margin they probably should have beaten. And then James Madison, possibly snubbed by the committee. If it was any other team it was snubbed, I would be like, oh, this is, not good for the future of the playoff. You want the committee to be making the right choices when it comes to positioning a group of 5 teams. But I just can't feel bad, or that bad at least. It is James Madison. At the end of the day, they should have beaten Louisville if they wanted a spot in the playoff. As we know from Liberty, going 12-0 in the regular season will get you places. Not everywhere, though, as UCF will tell you. Those are the main two for rival rundown. I don't even want to talk about Wake because just haven't been paying attention to them because they're irrelevant. I'm kidding. That's what they say we are. So I'm just going to move on. Let Bryce take it from here.
Well, Brody, I won't talk about Wake either yet. We'll jump into basketball before we get to Wake this show. I just want to quickly talk about basketball. Both have some positive starts to the week. The women's side last week had an unfortunate fall to Navy and then Old Dominion in overtime, which it felt like a game that they should have won on the road. It was back and forth, but they lost in overtime, but they beat American on the year. The women's side so far, Leigh Fantroy looked like a phenomenal pickup in the portal for head coach Sarah Jenkins, currently averaging 14 points and nearly 12 rebounds start the year. And my favorite thing is 11 steals and 4 blocks. So making a difference on both ends of the court so far. Kyla Correa has been a fun surprise for the offensive side of the ball so far, averaging over 13 points. It's an unfortunate thing with the women's side. Similar with the men's side, though, is still not having Ella Wanzer in action, captain on that end. And then Kendall Scott, who Coach Jenkins talked about being a point guard for the Blue Hens, went down with an injury early year as well. So, but still positive starts for the women's side, currently sitting at 2-2. They play this next week at Loyola and Towson. Wednesday, they play in Baltimore. Then Towson travels to them on Sunday, following the Delaware. Actually, I'm jumping myself ahead a little bit. They actually don't play at all this week. I'm thinking about the week after. So the women's side has a little bit of a break. Hopefully can get healthy heading into the back end of their non-conference schedule. The men's side gets their first win of the season against St. Peter's. Really strong first half, a 49-point first half, and it was needed. And you could see the difference with Justin Fernandez, Providence transfer, someone who I said was going to be the leading scorer for Delaware this year, did lead all scorers for the Hens last night. They fought off a St. Peter's team that they're a tough team. Analytics say they're a lower team right now, but They had a really solid score that kept them in it. Unfortunately, though, I don't want to see this as Jameel Brown. I don't want to trade injuries. Jameel Brown went down. We'll see how severe the leg injury is moving forward. Macon Emery with a double-double last night, still averaging a double-double in the year. He's been a great surprise. Tyler Hauser with an underrated night, 12 second-half points. Christian Bliss all around 15 points, 7 rebounds, 5 assists. The Balloons are going to look to build momentum now, heading down to Jacksonville for their annual MTE during Feast Week. Excited to see them play a really strong Southern Illinois team. Southern Illinois in a tough Missouri Valley Conference. Our conference mates, Missouri State, can allude to how tough the Salukis are in the past. And they have a really solid team. Their leading scorer so far, Quoran House, actually was at Jacksonville State last year. So if we have more conference mates listening, more familiarity there, averaging 20 points on the year in 4 games so far. And they have Prince Aligby, who played at Seton Hall last year and was a really tough player for them. It's not going to be an easy game. They're 2-2 so far. They lost to a really solid, in the past, really solid Nevada team. Still early to tell. They lost on the road to them in OT, and then they lost to North Dakota State by 7 on the road as well. A different team to maybe BYU, where they like to let it fly, and Southern Illinois likes to play as fast as BYU, but they like to get all their shots from within. A really tough team on the interior. And then I wanted to give a shout out for the second game of the tournament. That Southern Illinois game will be on Sunday, and then they will play against UNC Greensburg, a familiar team in the past, on Tuesday. I have a friend that I've connected with online from college basketball who goes online as SoCon Hoops Central. My friend Matt Hill, who we talked about. If Delaware plays a SoCon team this year, I would love a scouting report so I can share it on the podcast. So Matt provided me one for UNCG. So I just wanted to read this before we move on to Wake. But he sent me, having interviewed Mike Jones at Media Day, I can honestly say he's one of the best basketball minds in the country. Unfortunately, his team sometimes play very undisciplined, and we saw that in the NC State game. Disregarding this year, UNCG traditionally has been among the top of the league, but have had trouble winning in Asheville at the SoCon tournament. Ultimately, that is what you were judged for being in a one-bid league, as you know, covering Delaware. This year's team's a mystery. They have looked very good at times, but when it falls apart, it goes crazy bad. The Whitehead and Neely have been the catalysts. Whitehead is a D2 transfer, and you're starting to see more and more in this league. UNCG is a heavily internationally flavored team, and a lot of them are still getting used to the college game. It has been a struggle so far, but I think this game against Delaware should be very competitive. One thing I noticed is this game's not being streamed on ESPN Plus, and I was really looking forward to covering it remotely. I followed Delaware's CAA run last year and thought this would be a good one to cover. It should be a good one in the Sunshine State over Thanksgiving holiday. Shout out to Matt Hill. Please check out his coverage at SoCon Hoops Central. And for that, I will get us back focused in on football as we head into the Wake Forest Scout team heading into Week 13 for the Hens.
The Feathers and Field Goals podcast now continues as we enter the Scout Team segment for this week as Delaware steps out of conference play and into an ACC opponent taking on Wake Forest. And now joining us for discussion of the Demon Deacons, it's Conor O'Neill, the publisher for Deacons Illustrated and Devils Illustrated as well. A busy time of year with basketball season starting up, both men's and women's, and thinking about signing days coming up, and they'll be going before we know it too, after the regular season as well here. So thank you so much for taking some time, Conor. When you look at Wake Forest, a 7-3 record now, a 2-game winning streak for Wake Forest, and we've been saying over here at Feathers and Field Goals from time to time, maybe from a Delaware perspective, we would have liked to play Wake Forest in the slot where Kennesaw played Wake Forest to begin the year. But now you see Wake Forest really seems to be coming along, squeezing out a win over Kennesaw way back when. But now, how has year one with Jake Dickert been overall to this point?
I think if any Wake fan is realistic, they would tell you that this is about the best case scenario. They're coming off back-to-back 4-8 seasons. Dave Clawson built a legitimate program, and it just kind of dipped at the end. And so you're thinking it's going to take a couple years to put things back together. And really, through the first few weeks or month of the season, there wasn't all that much reason to believe that this was going to happen this way. I mean, it felt like in their first 3 games, the best game they played was the first half against NC State. And then, through 4 games, it felt like the best game they had played was a loss to Georgia Tech. And it's the Georgia Tech team that now I think last night's rankings had them at 16 or 14 or something like that in the CFP. So they've just gotten things rolling. It's been kind of a downhill slide into, okay, this team actually gets rolling. They have a defense that plays with their hair on fire. The nicest way I can put this is they have enough plays strung together offensively to win football games. They're not that impressive on that side of the ball. It is very much defense and special teams that carry the day and carry the water for this team. But yeah, this team having a chance to be, I believe Wake has had 2 double-digit win seasons in program history. And they're 1 win against Delaware, 1 road win against Duke, which is the other team I cover and is clearly not playing as good football as Wake Forest is right now. And then a win in a bowl game, and they have a 10-3 season where you're thinking, oh my God, this is one of the best seasons in program history. And nobody saw this coming both going into the year, and nobody saw it coming at the end of September.
From our outside looking in, we definitely saw the success being controlled by the defense, and we'll get into that later. We always start here. Delaware head coach Ryan Carty, a former quarterback and offensive play caller here at Delaware. So we're going to start with the quarterback position. Robbie Ashford, a true journeyman at the Power 4 level with the previous stops at Oregon, Auburn, and most recently in South Carolina. How has Robbie looked this season running the Wake offense in Dicker's first year?
Well, you just said the word running. He is a running quarterback. I sometimes I hesitate to even say he's a running quarterback. He's just kind of, sometimes it's running back playing quarterback. But he does make some throws. He can, when he's given time, when he can step up, he can make throws. You can see the talent is there that made him he was a really high ranked recruit going to Oregon. I think class of 2020 or 21. He's also been really tough, and that's probably the best thing I can say about him. He missed a game because of I need to get the injuries all mixed up in my head, but he missed 1 game because of a knee. I think he had a thumb injury that cost him the game against Oregon State. He's been banged up, and you're going to get that with a running quarterback. It's just that wear and tear is inevitable when you run at that position. I think the stat that I was most impressed with against Carolina was he didn't run the ball that much. He only had 8 carries for 63 yards, and I think 6 of the 8 resulted in first downs. So he was a lot more efficient running the ball and calling his number. Of course, he got the 1 touchdown at the end that, Bill Belichick calls a timeout when Wake Forest doesn't want to run another play. And then, so a lot of people holding the under tickets were very angry with that one, but he's been steady-ish. He throws some bounce passes. Maybe in a couple of years he'll regret the NCAA when they make a rule change to say bounce passes on screens can be allowed. Then he'll really have missed his chance. But he's given them enough. I mean, he's the main starting quarterback. They've tried to work Deshaun Purdy in there at times. But he's the main starting quarterback for a 7-3 football team.
Now that we know a little bit more about Ashford here, other names, other playmakers for Delaware fans to know and to look out for against Wake Forest. We understand it really has been defensively driven, so we'll get there. One last teaser on that. But offensively, who are those top guys Ashford's looking for?
Yeah, I mean, in the passing game, Carlos Hernandez has really emerged. We get to see a lot of fall camp. We get to see about 3 weeks of fall camp with these guys. And so fall camp, I would have told you Carlos Hernandez was this team's best receiver. And then they got into the season and he had some drops. He's their punt returner, and he misjudged a punt or 2 that went over his head and then muffed another 1 or 2. And it's clearly a confidence issue, and he lost some snaps to Chris Barnes, a redshirt freshman who came over from Washington State. Hernandez also came from Washington State. Barnes missed the game against Carolina. Their best perimeter receiver, Micah Mays, missed the game against Carolina and the game at Virginia. And Hernandez had the only touchdown of the game at Virginia at an 88-yard punt return that he fielded on a bounce, and I thought he was just going to field it and go down and save some field position. And then he had a flukish touchdown. He had a 50-yard fumble recovery touchdown against Carolina to start things, and then had a 70-yard catch and run touchdown. And his emergence has not come at a better time with the two guys out that have been out. The other guy on offense, is Demond Claiborne. He was a 1,000-yard rusher last year for a 4-8 football team. I always think that's a little more impressive when your team loses 2/3 of its games and you still have a guy who can run for 1,000. He's a senior running back. I think he's probably going to be a draft pick. He is a threat to score every time he has the ball in his hands. He is just an explosive athlete. I think last year he was clocked as the fastest player in college football. He had a kick return at Miami that I think he hit 22.6 miles an hour. I heard that on the broadcast of the CW. I've been saying all year, 95 to 99% of college football teams will say the quarterback is the most important player on their offense. I think Demond Claiborne is the most important player on Wake's offense. When he's rolling, everything else kind of falls into place.
Definitely a name to watch out there for Delaware, who has struggled against teams that really run the ball well this season. Now heading over to the driver of Wake's success being the defense, who have only averaged 19.5 points against per game on the season. Looking at it, they haven't given up a touchdown in 2 games after that Florida State fall. Jake Dickert, it looks like, looking at his history, has offensive history in his playing career, but really as a coach has been on the defensive side. What defensive structure, what base do the Demon Deacons run, and who are some names that the Blue Hens fans should know on the defensive end heading into Saturday?
It's pretty much a straight 4-2-5. Just about everybody in the ACC plays a 4-2-5 because everybody in the ACC wants to throw a slot receiver out there and get the ball in his hands on quick and short stuff. They have been really impressive with what they've done on the defensive line. So the coaching transition, they had a lot of roster churn. Like I think 4 offensive linemen that would have been starters this year left. And it's not like they transferred down a level. Like one went to Florida State, one went to South Carolina, Michigan State, and Missouri. And they're all legitimately good starting power conference players. On Wake's defensive line, they had to bring in a whole new defensive line, but that's because all the guys they had last year were seniors. Like they were leaving regardless. And so they've brought in guys. They brought 2 defensive ends from Colorado State, Gabe Kershke and Newer Gottkuth, who have been really good. They brought in Langston Hardy from UConn, has been outstanding. They brought in the most successful position group at Wake Forest, offense, defense, or special teams, is their defensive tackles. They have 4 that they feel comfortable holding out there in any situation. Their transfers from Idaho, which is Dallas Afalava. One's a transfer from, I always forget the directional Kentucky. It's one of Eastern or Western Kentucky, where Jaden Loving came from. They have a former walk-on, Zach Lohovichin. He's been at Wake for 5 or 6 years, but he joined the program as a walk-on from Charlotte. And then Mateen Ibiriga, he transferred in last year and barely played from Georgetown. So you're talking about the most successful position on this team, and you have 2 transfers from lower levels, one who's been there for a year but transferred in from the FCS, and then a former walk-on. And they just, everything kind of builds out from their dominance and how hard they are to block in the middle of that defensive line. They're getting great play out of the linebackers. It's another position where they go 4 deep, and they really don't have any preference, or they don't have any, there's not that much separation 1 through 4. So they feel good about putting anybody out there in any situation. And, it's kind of twofold. They play really good defense. So they're getting off the field pretty early, and they're not having to play all these downs. And then when you're doing that, and also you have the depth, you're keeping guys fresh for the third and fourth quarter, where you don't feel like they're wearing down because they've only played the top guys in the front seven like 20, 30, 40 snaps to that point. It's not like anybody's overloaded with 50 to 60 snaps and is wearing down at the end of these games. The secondary is where they do play a lot of guys, a few guys, a lot of snaps. Nick Anderson barely comes off the field. He's kind of the run the box safety. They'll put Devon Patterson at the nickel. I think he's a future NFL draft pick. He's a redshirt sophomore who he's got great size. They love him playing close to the line of scrimmage as that nickel. And then Karan Prunty is a transfer from North Carolina A&T actually, but he had a freshman All-American season in 2020 for Kansas. He's kind of rejuvenated his career. And he's a great feel-good story, especially because Wake's biggest problem last year was they had no corners that could cover anybody, respectfully, of course. And they have 3 of them this year that they feel, again, it's one of those where they feel good putting 3 of them out there against anybody.
Love hearing an old CAA football name. That really made us light up, I think, coming from FCS to FBS debut season for Delaware in the FBS. But, for Wake Forest now in the schedule, interesting timing for this Delaware game coming in between rivalry games for Wake Forest. How's the crowd expected to be here this week?
We'll see. It's coming off of an emotional game. I mean, Wake people love to beat Carolina. It was their first win against Carolina I think they lost 4 straight games to them over the last 5 years. And some of those were in heartbreaking fashion with guys like Sam Hartman on those teams that couldn't beat them. So it's hard to gauge whether there'll be a come down off of that and it'll be a little less, just kind of the yin and yang of it, or if there'll be a little more excitement because they beat Carolina and because this is the last time that a lot of these fans will get to see Wake Forest play a football game this year. So, I mean, Wake has a 30,000 seat stadium. It's not gonna be rocking, and it's not gonna be, again, respectfully as I can say this, it's not gonna be 70,000 people all chanting for a 3-hour game. But it is senior day. They'll have some seniors fired up. The student section will be a little fired up, and the noon game probably works a little bit against the crowd too. If this was later in the day, they might be a little more fired up, but it's tough to say that this will be the most raucous environment that Wake has had this season.
Delaware, it's their second road game against a Power 4 conference this year. First start of the year out in Boulder against Colorado, where the stadium's seemed rocking out there. I know a lot of Blue Hens fans, this might be an easier trip for them to get down to Winston-Salem, so I'm excited to see the Blue Hen fans get down there. And the first time, I think they've played Wake. I don't even know the history on that. Dan would have to check me on that later. But regardless, Connor, thanks so much for joining us, for us to learn a little bit more about the Demon Deacons, as it's not a team that a lot of us really pay attention to in Conference USA, but excited to see how the stadium looks this weekend, and excited for this matchup between the Blue Hens and Demon Deacons. So thanks for taking some time out of your busy schedule for us.
Yeah. Bryce and Dan, thank you for having me. Thanks to Connor for joining us heading into this game week. It's been, I think it's been my favorite segment of our show weekly to not just get to learn about these teams, especially teams that we don't really cross film watch in the sense of preparing for Conference USA opponents at this point of the year. I guess maybe we could, if we were playing Kennesaw, we maybe would have came across some Wake Forest tape heading into this week. But again, huge thanks to Connor for joining us to break down the Demon Deacons. Sounds like they are well above expectations for their first season of Coach Dickert in Winston-Salem. Brody, 3-and-out time. What are you looking at? We talked about the Sam Houston game and everything that went wrong and how can this team get back on track heading into its final 2-game stretch? Not really focused about the home game yet, but how can they get back on track this week?
Well, this Wake Forest team has had a lot of games where they don't score a lot of points, and um, they hold the opposing team to a very low point total as well. I'm looking at home versus SMU, a 13-12 win. At home versus Kennesaw, a 10-9 win. They don't have trouble scoring points in some of these games. But there's another at number 14 Virginia, a 16-9 victory. If this team can hang around, not make mistakes that they made at Sam Houston, kind of take the embarrassment that they must be healing after that Sam Houston game, and kind of channel it into like some more polished play. Just hang around this team, this Wake Forest team who's not going to take you seriously coming into this game. Their eyes are set on Duke. They just played North Carolina. They just got off of a win against Virginia. And they also got our helmet wrong on the schedule release. So kind of take the embarrassment from Sam Houston and channel it into making fewer mistakes, hopefully. And I'm gonna be there. I'm gonna be in Wake Forest. You know, the hotel was booked before the Sam Houston game. I'm not sure I would have booked it after the Sam Houston game. I'm less confident now. And this game is on the road, which is a place that Delaware has struggled to win in the past. They have not won a road game that I've went to in a long time, actually, thinking back to past last year, where the road victory that the last road victory that I attended that they won was at Monmouth. Tough. That's tough. But just hang around. Don't make the mistakes that you tend to make when you think it's a game that you should win. And hang around this team because they don't respect you.
Dan, what do you got?
I'm going to go toward money downs, specifically fourth downs for Delaware on offense, and really the fourth down conversion margin, I guess, for a clunky term, if we're going to account for looking at how well both the Fightin Blue Hens and the Demon Deacons do on fourth downs. Wake Forest, number 1 in the ACC in opponent fourth down conversion percentage at a 35% converting fourth downs for opponents against Wake Forest. So, and I just look at it as Delaware in the situation, an underdog, not any momentum going into this game. It's consecutive weeks on the road for the Blue Hens. Going to need to, if Delaware is putting a scare on Wake Forest and hanging around, there's going to be some juncture in the game. And we could say this in general, too, with Coach Carney's offense and Delaware, thankfully, moving the chains a good bit when things are going right. And on average, Delaware does pick up a good number of first downs per game. The more series of downs you have, the more likely you are to at some point run into a fourth down that you can go for. So typically we do see Delaware line up for fourth down on offense at least once or twice in a game. But even more so I would expect now in a game as an underdog on the road. So if Delaware is going to be clean on offense, part of that is not turning it over on downs, let alone turning it over in the formats we've seen, unfortunately, in streaks here this year and including last week. So it's not an easy task against Wake Forest's defense, but I do think that Delaware may be a little bit healthier, hopefully, in terms of just healthy, not even in the sense of injuries, but hearing it mentioned in the midweek press conference this week for Delaware heading into Wake, the flu-like sickness, or maybe it straight up just was flu that was affecting players or some players, having that hopefully out of the system, knock on wood about that can help make it a situation where Delaware has everything in the tank, because you're going to need to empty the tank, including on fourth down against Wake Forest. So that's going to be my one thing in particular to watch, thinking about that Wake Forest defense Delaware's going up against.
And I'm thinking of something that is on the similar end of yours, of converting money downs and keeping them field moving, finding something going for the offense, and that's what they've struggled with on the road, especially as turnovers, and they come in waves. I think that this team needs to find a clean game like it did on the road against FIU. I expect there to be significantly more fans in Winston-Salem than there was in Houston or when there was in Miami. I think Coach Carty mentioned in his presser this week that they took a while to bring their energy with them on the field in terms of being an environment of sometimes you're trying to feed off the crowd or feed off a play. And I think that stretch that we talked about, the second phase of the Sam Houston game, there wasn't really much to feed off on. And something I think is just taking care of the ball. And that's such an easy thing to point because, everyone wants to take care of the ball. But I think that affects, both of yours in the sense of if Delaware is going to keep it close, if they're going to set the Wake Forest offense up for harder field positions, it's going to be taking care of the ball and similar things. If you're converting third downs, you don't have to punt, you don't have to move field position. If you're even fourth downs, if you're not getting, especially they've had fourth downs and they're on their own 50 when they're not getting it, and then that sets up an easier life for Wake Forest to. I guess in the moments that they are going for it on fourth is when they really need it later in games when down, but setting Wake Forest up to tally or strengthen a lead if they have one at that point. So I'm worried about the offense taking care of the ball. We've seen a lot of fumbles this year. We've seen some turnovers. Of course, in a very pass-heavy offense, you're going to see some interceptions. But just find a way to string together 60 minutes of taking care of the ball on offense, and I think we'll see more points from 3 or 0 and in 7, hopefully, against a team that hasn't given up a defensive touchdown. It's probably my third time saying it this episode, a defensive touchdown in 2 weeks. So it's not an easy task at hand. It's the Wake's success is definitely driven from the defensive side of the ball, but it's an exciting opportunity for Delaware to find a momentum heading into its last week at home for its own senior night and probably maybe close out to the season. We have our bowl tracker here at Feathers and Field Goals. I hope they can get to 6 wins, and then we'll see what happens from there. We have some action to watch this week. We have some game weeks that I have up rooting interest for this. But until then, let's get into our score predictions here at Feathers and Field Goals. Dan, you're always our leadoff batter. You start us off.
Well, I need a bounce back in terms of predictions, but I don't even want it. I don't want to bounce back if I'm going to be right about picking Wake Forest. This is one of those classic cases where just when you think a team hasn't given you much reason to take them for the upset, maybe they do pull it and make us all buy back in as far as wearing Delaware blue and gold glasses. But I'm a believer in the team as far as finishing out, hitting 6 overall wins and hoping that there's a chance to have a bowl where you can then finish over 500 on the entire year. That's still the big picture thought I have when we get off recording here. But look at Wake Forest, talk about their defense a lot, talk about a quarterback who can move it on the ground, really make Delaware's defense pretty tuckered out possibly, because you think about it, if Delaware's offense even has 1 or 2 mistakes that there's no reason to not predict on the road, unfortunately. Again, that's more time Delaware's defense spends on the field, and then you're thinking, man, a quarterback who can make you pay with his legs, maybe late in the play too. Delaware's defense might have everything stopped for 3/4 or 4/5 of a play, and then at the very end, it's just a matter of who has the gas in the tank to have the QB leak and gain on a rush for a first down or for some score or something like that. So I can just see how this can become a long day. Delaware's defense was pretty gritty. I keep thinking, I was there in Houston. Delaware's defense was having so much asked of it. Like, please keep us in the game. We could fall out of this thing if there's an extra Sam Houston touchdown here and there off of Delaware failed drives one way or another. So Delaware's defense has given me enough reason to think, hey, they're going to be tough as nails again, hold Wake to a reasonable score offensively. But I'm going to go Demon Deacons 28, Delaware 14. I can't justify taking Delaware to score more than 2 times in total right now, which is painful to do, but I'm going to try to stay disciplined, and that's going to be Delaware's path in the game. It be disciplined enough to do its fundamental things, right? Because when Delaware's clicking fundamentally, it can happen in a flash of an eye. You look, oh, there's an X play, explosive pass to Sean Wilson. Oh, maybe Duplessis gets back at a higher clip involved that we expected and have come to see. So it can happen in a hurry for Delaware when the discipline is there to keep things under wraps. But it's a defense at Sam Houston that was having a nose for the ball, and Wake Forest probably profiles similarly. So it is pretty scary in that way.
I'm going to go with Wake 24-13 over Delaware. I think Wake Forest, with their defensive ability to keep teams out of the end zone, I think that in Delaware recently, having struggled in the red zone themselves, I'd say not in a 2-minute setting, but they did, I guess, in the 2-minute offense there, down 3 at the end. But they've been really strong in 2-minute offenses moving downfield throughout the season. I think that they have to settle for a couple field goals. I think that Wake Forest, I think that the Delaware on red zone defense got a lot better. I think they maybe hold them up for a little bit. Like you said, Dan, I'm actually not too worried about the defense right now. They didn't have a good stretch, but I think the Louisiana Tech game, even just thinking about the start of that Sam Houston game and still holding to 3 on a lot of those tough field positions, every point mattered in that. But I just think that with less field behind them, Delaware's defense is getting better at this point of the season. So I still think I'm not going to say that they give up 30 or more points. I think I'm actually getting away from that for Delaware this year in my week predictions. But I think it's going to be hard to get in the end zone for Delaware. If they can get in once, I hope they can get in twice or more times. But for now, I'm just going to say they get 2 field goals and a touchdown. I'll go 24-13 Delaware. I think they fight. I think I told you guys off air, I'm definitely not as high as I was last week. As we saw, I predicted multiple score win, 3 possession win, which now is looking a little silly on my part. But I think this team will fight because it's just getting towards the end of that time of the year. I think Wake Forest and blanketed in between their 2 rivalry games. I think Delaware can maybe find a way to make the crowd uncomfortable, as they did in Colorado for a half. I'd like to maybe see that stretch as far as it can. I think Delaware is going to fight in this one.
That's a good point. I looked online. Tickets are $8. I prefer to buy my tickets at the door when I go to away games because they give you the ticket stub. Not that there's been a winning away game for me, as I mentioned, in a while. Can't put that up on the wall. It's bad luck. But tickets are $8, which tells me that there may be a lot of empty seats. This might not be a game that the Wake Forest student base really care about, or maybe the alumni aren't going to make the drive out to go see. It's going to be 73 degrees in Winston-Salem, which plays right into the way that Delaware wants to play. And like you said, this team might be overlooking Delaware to a degree. I think that they're definitely talented enough to beat us. Don't get me wrong. That shouldn't go without being mentioned. But I'm going to take Delaware.
Oh, now, Bryce, we're filling time a little bit for our audio listeners.
In my headgear selection, I'm taking Delaware to win this one. I'm taking them 15-14. It's going to be very low scoring. If Delaware gets in the end zone at all, which my score prediction does not necessarily predict, I think that Cardi will go for it, go for 2 and not get it. And I think that's how Delaware wins this game, is a very low scoring game. I need Manny Rojas to have a career day because this is a game that there's no pressure for Delaware to win. There's nothing to lose but everything to gain for the Blue Hens, and the opposite is true for Wake Forest, who, judging by everyone chirping at me on Twitter, I think that they're too good to be playing a Delaware team with just as much national relevance as Wake Forest, all things considered. So that's my prediction. And I'll be there, so roll Hens.
Dan, I feel like I can speak for the 2 of us. We hope that Brody is right in this prediction, and safe travels to Brody and the Blue Hens faithful heading down to Winston-Salem this weekend. If you made it this far, thanks for joining us for another episode of Feathers and Field Goals. We will be back next week for our last regular season episode. We're still figuring out what we're going to do. We're hoping we have a little bit of postseason ball to talk about, but we can focus on it. The team can't focus on it. We'll get there when we get there. First, Wake Forest ahead. Thanks for being here. If you're new, please subscribe. If you haven't yet, please subscribe. Please leave a like and a comment down below. And thanks for being here for another week with us here at Feathers and Field Goals.